everyone. Another Tokyo Xanadu video today. I did one back in August 2024, and that was specifically for the release of the Switch version. I will try and pop the link up for you, because in that video I looked at a whole avalanche of questions, looked at the background of the game. There was a lot there. I'll just show you a screenshot of the timestamps I had organised. So if you feel you need a bit of background, if you're not that familiar with Tokyo Xanadu, then I would recommend you might want to hop back to that video first. I want to have a closer look at the game, especially on the PS4, and show you a bit what the game is like, really. But let's start first with at least a quick look at the Vita version, which is really the first one that came out, certainly in Japan, now over 10 years ago, actually in 2015. And at the time, being a big Vita fan, as you know, I got the limited edition from Amazon. The box got rather mangled due to their inept packaging. This was at the time for a smaller kind of limited edition and a JRPG in the West. I thought it was a pretty nice edition. I'll show you. There was a card game included. Of course, the game. And I played this game on the Vita to smithereens, really. I absolutely loved it. It consumed a lot of my time on the Vita. It's perfect for the Vita. It is, by its nature, a handheld game. And even though it was later transferred to main consoles, it never lost that DNA, really, of shorter mission-based tasks to fulfill and the ability to save at almost any point and suspend the game. And it came with a dear little plushie, the mascot, Morimaru. So Morimaru today, of course, will be the assistant. And the box also came with a very nice art book, beautifully printed in a glossy finish. We'll have a closer look at that in a moment because I've got another copy in this bigger box. So in the West, Tokyo Xanadu came out for the PS4, but already in the expanded edition, which they had introduced in Japan a year after the original game was released. As you can see, the title now has an EX plus at the end, indicating the expanded edition. How much expansion are we talking about? Is it just sort of a little bit, like parsley sprinkled on the top? No, this is actually a substantial expansion and updating. It's not just something tacked on. There are new bits to the story interpolated during the game itself, and a lot of additional material, really. This is an example of a side story introduced as extra content in the EX Plus edition. The stories are told from the viewpoint of the individual concerned, giving a bit more insight into background and some detail of their lives. The Vita game you can play through just covering the main story and probably around 30 hours, so that's a really nice length, I think, for something that's not a really big or hugely major JRPG. But you certainly can spend up to 60 hours even on the Vita game if you are a completionist, want to get all the achievements, trophies, etc., and do absolutely everything and complete the extensive friends list with all the little, scenes, unlock everything. Once we get to the EX Plus edition, you can easily add another 30 hours onto the 60 you already have here. Have I completed everything? Well, I have completed the main story with the normal ending. I've done the epilogue, which is quite big, and that gives you the true ending. Afterwards, there is what's called an after story.
あれから、あの暑い夏の日から3ヶ月近くが経った。
Which again adds quite a large amount with, among other things, 6 extra dungeons and some other types of quests, etc. I'm in the middle of that. Tokyo Xanadu is not something that I sit down and play exclusively. It's something I have actually chipped away at over the years because it is an ideal game to just pick up for some time and then put it down again and return to it at a later point, because as I explained, being a handheld game by nature, it has that characteristic of being able to picked up and continued very easily. I find all the Falcom games, they somehow seem to suit me. I can pick up any of them, even a Trails game or an East game, and very, very quickly get back into the swing of things. I think a lot of it has to do with the combat being so well designed and so intuitive. So basically I'm eking out the last bit of Tokyo Xanadu, which I'm nowadays playing the PS4 version on my PS5. And one reason why I'm continuing is that I simply like to go back into the world. I thought when I got to the true ending and, that was that, I thought, that's okay now, that's enough. I can put it aside now and, move on to other things. But only a week or two later, no, I was back in Tokyo Xanadu in Morimiya City. Why? Because I like the characters, I like the world, I like the feeling of being there and doing things, and just walking up to an NPC and starting a conversation, and suddenly there's a tiny little update or side quest available that I hadn't realised was there. There are so many little things in this game, little things and big things. If you've been caught up before in a Trails game and in the world, if it's got its hooks into you, and you want something a bit similar but in a different kind of world, I really think you need to give Tokyo Xanadu a try if you haven't experienced it yet. And yes, it is set in a school. Some people are not too fond of that kind of setting and said, well, I've played Persona and that's enough school for me. Okay, fair enough. But for those of you who don't mind, you're dealing here with high schoolers who I would say are pretty mature and responsible kind of kids, actually. And they have some problems that I would describe as already more adult type problems. And that sort of level of maturity, I think, is one reason why I like going back and just getting the feel again of that world. Now, this is a big box, but it was not an expensive limited edition. I remember at the time when they were obviously trying to clear stocks, probably worldwide. I saw it advertised everywhere on eBay, all kinds of retail stores had it, and at a reduced price. I think quite a few of you will actually have this edition and will have picked it up in a sale or heavily discounted. I wouldn't be surprised. It looks like they produced probably more than the market could absorb at the time. So yes, there wasn't really a supply problem at all. So let's have a look what's inside the box. And the biggest thing inside the box I had already taken out because it's a bit awkward lifting out and the flap here opening up for my finger, so I didn't want to spend half an hour wrestling with that. So this is a very nice box with a figurine. And the figure is White Shroud. And White Shroud is one of the big additions for the EX Plus version. White Shroud does not exist in the Vita version. That character and that figure is added specifically into this version. The rather mysterious sequences with White Shroud are skillfully woven into some of the story chapters, and you also get a few standalone episodes, either as side story or intermission, where you control White Shroud inside a dungeon. The mystery of White Shroud is unveiled in the latter part of the game, but you don't get to control White Shroud again until the post-game content of the after story. You can see here how extremely powerful White Shroud is. He demolishes an Elder Greed with ease and at record speed. So here we have White Shroud. Figures that are included with limited editions can be problematic. Sometimes they're on the small side, or the quality is not terribly good because figures are expensive to make. So obviously they look for how to minimize the cost for this type of edition where you have several items in the box. And my comment would be that I think it's actually a pretty good figure to have, where they cleverly reduce the cost of the design of the figure is in that they didn't have to mould a face. A face is obviously always a tricky thing to do, and with White Shroud you can't show the face anyway because that would be giving away a huge spoiler for the story. So anyway, it's absolutely fine and it'll look great on your, on your shelf or wherever you like to keep your figurines. Then there's a small limited edition soundtrack with 10 tracks. The identical soundtrack is also in the Vita box. The large box, the PS4 box, also contains the pack for the cards, the game. And they feature the special weapons each character carries in the game. And the box, of course, contains the game itself. You might be able to see that mine is still in cellophane. How come? How did I play the game? Well, years ago already, I had bought, in a sale obviously on PlayStation, the digital version, and have always kept it on my consoles because it's just more convenient to, at the drop of a hat, when the fancy strikes me, to say, oh yeah, start up Tokyo Xanadu, hop back in for 10 minutes, I can fit it in before supper. Yeah. Let's have a look at the art book and talk a bit about the characters and the story, etc. Now, I'm not just talking about this today because I feel like it. I do feel like it, yes, but the reason is that we're all looking forward to the release of a new Xanadu game. Now, many of us who have played Tokyo Xanadu have been quietly hoping for a long time that they might decide to do a sequel. And I'd always thought they might just pick up the character group they've got and maybe do what they are doing with the Trails games, where you see the characters moving through time, growing up. So I thought maybe just a few years on, see how they're doing, what's happening there in Morimiya City. And when Falcom released a trailer during a Nintendo Switch Direct,
Kyoto is the capital. Another world exists that's encroaching on our own. A world where monsters roam free. A boy named Rei must use his newly awakened powers against the threat as he joins Hirasaka Academy, a school for gifted students. The Academy's goal? Conquer Xanadu, the great labyrinth rumored to be the origin of this other world.
We all looked at it and said, oh, that's interesting, because it's a bit different, I think, to what we had expected. Now, is that a good or a bad thing? I don't know. We'll just have to wait until July when the game comes out. So I first want to talk about this game, and then we'll have a look at the forthcoming Kyoto Xanadu, which includes some elements that go further back to the original Xanadu games. So just a very quick refresher. When high school student Ko Tokisaka encounters the nightmare realm known as the Eclipse, remember that word if you haven't played the game yet, his world is forever changed. Reality distorts as monsters threaten the safety of Morimiya City. Ko must transform his soul into a powerful weapon to defeat the vile Eclipse once and for all. And the game loop was pretty much a combination of time spent at school. It sounds a bit like Persona, but actually Tokyo Xanadu has a very different vibe. The feel of it is quite different. And you don't have quite the same activities in school as you do in Persona. So I wouldn't compare it directly to Persona, no. It's like most JRPGs. They have all somewhere been inspired by Persona and have taken elements and integrated them. And I think they've done it well in Tokyo Xanadu. They've done their own thing. You can see the inspiration where it might have come from, especially with a school setting. Then you have a large city to explore and quests and activities to carry out there. And then, of course, you have the gateways. Into the world of the eclipse, where you need to do battle with the monsters. So that's pretty much the game loop. And the important thing, of course, is that you meet a lot of people. I'm really not exaggerating when I say the cast is huge. You're used to that sort of thing, I assume, from the Trails games, and it's no different here. Co teams up with a lot of people to tackle the eclipse. However, one thing about the battle system, because it was originally a smaller handheld title for the Vita, you only ever have actually 3 team members fighting together. You can easily switch around and pull in a support person, etc. And it is actually super important that you change the team member on the fly depending on what situation you're facing, what type of enemy. But there are only 3 in those dungeon explorations who are fighting together with Co. This is an early boss in the Chapter 2 side story, and it's a tough fight because you still, at this stage, have low HP and skills. The boss has several nasty status ailments up her sleeve, so I'm sending Asuka out to quickly get rid of those fire supports. Co is in the team, but unfortunately because he's fire skill based, he's not that much help. So Asuka and Sora have to do the hard work. And on several occasions I have to pause and top up their HP or even resurrect one of them. Having lots of cooked items really helps. It's now 6 years since I recorded this, so I can't recall details of what, for example, those crystal balls do, but eventually Asuka and Sora managed to pull off a combo attack. And that finishes off the Elder Greed. You can already see, since only one team member is ever active at a time, how important your grasp of the individual skills and elemental attacks is. So that is the only, limitation, I would say, that I need to point out. If you're used to having a larger team or like having something like, 6 people to organise, then you might find that a bit on the smaller side. However, as with many Falcom games, there isn't just the battle, there is a certain amount of what I would call light or lighter platforming involved, as well as some light puzzles. This birdcage dungeon provides some beautiful opportunities for platforming and dungeon mechanic puzzles. Also keep in mind that you're always ranked on how fast you manage to get through a dungeon. At the start of every dungeon mission, you get the opportunity to see what enemies you're up against, and you can adjust your team formation accordingly. With only 3 team members, it's important to have the right skills for the job, and accordingly you're always given the opportunity to do just that. So all the dungeons are nicely varied and how they are designed. You've got a nice flow of activities all the time. So here we have the main character, Ko. Ko is not a silent protagonist. Absolutely not. He's a character in his own right. I have found him actually very interesting. All the characters are well written, they have good background stories, and they develop during the story of the game. And that is something that is really important to me. That, for me, sets apart JRPGs from many other types of games, that you have this almost novelistic character development. Ko is described as a second-year student at the academy, a typical student. He may sound curt at times, but in reality is quite friendly. He started living by himself while his parents are overseas long-term. He is not a member of any particular club. He works a large number of part-time jobs instead. And this is actually quite an important facet of his life. It reveals something about his character that you find out down the road. Obviously, I'm not going to delve into that. I was quite moved by it in the end, I'd say, yeah. And there are a few occasions where Ko, who normally comes across as quite almost laid back in his attitude, he won't often contradict people or, stand out in any particular way, a bit more reserved, you would say. But in the latter part of the story, there are moments when a really important decision has to be made or a really tricky problem appears, and Ko suddenly says, no, we need to do it this way, and he is absolutely certain and determined. And everybody looks and says, wow, is that the Ko we know? And it is so interesting when that happens. Please watch out for it when you play the game. And there you see another side of his character, a side that is usually hidden, but very well explained.
What? Whoa! 久我山お前
名前は呼ばないでププでもうおーっていつも済ましてる時坂くんの意外な一面発見ってやつ
済ましてねえしガキみてえな真似してんじゃねえっての
そうだ時坂 この近くでもいいんだが、せっかくだからがっつりとした腹にたまるものを食わせてやるよ。
おお、いただきます。うめえ。
学園に入るとき、とある筋に紹介、住み込みで厄介になってるんだ。この前の騒動じゃおやっさんと奥さんに随分と心配をかけちまった。
ああ、
了解っす。
先輩も形なしっすね。
はあ、正直恵まれすぎだろ。いずれ世話になった人全員。時坂、お前たちに異界に関わることで何かあったらいつでも俺なんかの力でよ。
しよう先輩。100人力だぜ。
ああ、時坂、今帰りか。今日もアルバイトか。お前もなかなかいい。あれから3ヶ月、早いものだ。ま、縁なんてものはそう簡単に切れるものじゃないさ。たとえ遠く離れ離れになったとしても、二度と会えなくなったとしても、共に苦難を乗り越えてきた仲間ならな。おっと、そろそろ時間だ。
Now, in the hands of lesser writers, those sorts of scenes might come across as unconvincing or awkward. For me, they didn't at all, which tells me they prepared the ground well, and you understand Ko. You can move with him and see the bigger picture of what's going on. Asuka, his first and very important team member, she's also a lovely character, comes across maybe sometimes as a bit of a tsundere, but again there's a lot more depth to her.
柊、
呆れた。どうしてあなたがここにいるの？あれほど関わるなって忠告したでしょ。
Sora is the martial arts expert. Yuki, at first you think, wow, kind of weird guy, do we really need him? You do need Yuki. And again, once you get to know the background and what's going on with him and why he's reacting in a particular way, it's just really interesting. Again, I thought very convincingly written, and I was quite surprised how I took to Yuki in the end. This is Mitsuki. Now, you probably will notice that they're all holding their own particular weapon, and that's another thing. As I mentioned, you only have, at any one time, 3 people in your team fighting, so it is essential that they all cover very different ground, that their abilities are not duplicated. And I found all the combat characteristics for each character really interesting, and they were all different.
ネメシスが誇る異界化予測 AI ホロス、噂以上の性能みたいですね。
ネット上の無数の情報を統合してそれが本当なら神様アプリ以上の性能。
完璧ではないけど、実際今まで何度も助けになってくれている。
確かにいつもすげえタイミング。
So it was really an absolute joy to use them to try out the different attacks you could do or defense mechanics with the different characters. Shio. And of course, we're talking about high schoolers, pop music's very important. There's an idol group, yes, and Rion is one of the 5 girls, and she's also a team member. Let's hear SPiKA perform their most popular song in concert.
恋のシューティングスター
Now those were the main characters. Then comes a big cast of so-called minor characters. But those minor characters, they're not part of the combat team, but they are actually really important too and often occupy quite a lot of time in the story. Someone like Shiori in particular, Ko's oldest school childhood friend, Mr. Goro, the somewhat enigmatic teacher, has a pivotal role. Here you see the members of the idol group, and importantly, White Shroud is listed as a minor character. Well, in the main story, which is what most people will probably play, you encounter White Shroud only on 2 occasions. So that's probably why they've listed White Shroud as a minor character. You can play as or with White Shroud later on, after the epilogue, once you get into the after-story game. The mysterious Rem, who looks a bit like a little girl, she's of course very important.
よく来たね。女の子って透けてる？
お前は。
And at the top we have Morimaru. And then come pages and pages of NPCs. And yes, they're all different, and many of them are quite important during quests, etc. And there are also some explanations of, key organizations and emblems for you to understand the background.
異界に関わる勢力はいくつか存在していますが、ネメシスとゾディアックはその代表格であると言えるでしょう。
いや、ネットの世界ではゾディアックの名前をそこそこ見かけ、正直よくある陰謀論の一つくらいに思ってたけど。
So this is a very nice and, as always with Falcom, well-designed art book. To finish this Tokyo Xanadu section, I want to have a look at some of the commonly voiced criticism of the game. You will have noticed by now, no doubt, that I'm very positive about the game. It's obviously not a flagship title, but nevertheless I think well made. This is quite astounding, really, considering that Falcom entrusted this project to a very young team to gain experience, and this is what they achieved. So what gives? Why has its reception been so lukewarm with so many people in the West? I came across a really fascinating post on GameFAQs boards, which actually encouraged me to raise this question here in the video. There are 4 perceived issues with the game that are always cited, and GameFAQs member ZenVirus does a good job at identifying them and then systematically picking them apart. Now, I don't really want to go into the detail of the argument because you need to know the game and the story to be able to follow that, and I don't want to go into spoiler territory here. But if you're interested, I would very much encourage you to catch up with that particular post. It makes for very good reading, and I agree a lot with what ZenVirus has to say. As a kind of segue to the next topic, the new Xanadu game, I want to mention that, in my view, there were quite a few substantial issues in Tokyo Xanadu, especially around the various organizations, their role in the world, that were not entirely explained. I didn't feel like we had real closure on a whole variety of thematic concerns, which is why I had always been really hoping for a direct sequel to Tokyo Xanadu. However, what we'll be getting is a completely new story. So now let's have a look at what Kyoto Xanadu promises. We don't have an awful lot of information yet, especially in visual terms. There are just some very brief trailers and video clips available. I have tried to grab what I could and will use that as material to explain what I think might be happening. Please remember, as I mentioned, Tokyo Xanadu, while the emphasis is on combat, on the typical Falcom fluid, fast, intuitive action style combat, there is a reasonably strong element of platforming and puzzling involved. Usually environmental puzzles to get through the dungeons, you know. So let's have a look now what they propose to do in Kyoto. Falcom have set up a nice-looking website with plenty of details about the upcoming game, which is set in an alternate reality, modern Japan, in Kyoto, of course, and there is a subtitle as well. Whether that's final as yet, I'm not sure, but it's usually given as The Blooming Phantom. We also have uncertainty around the publisher in the West. Fingers crossed there that we're going to get a good translation and good distribution to all regions. Very briefly, the story setting focuses on a school called Hirasaka Academy. So yes, just like Tokyo Xanadu, we have students in a modern Japan setting having to deal with supernatural events. The protagonist is, again, a boy called Rei Kamiya, and he'll become involved in exploring a great labyrinth that lies beneath the academy. As you see here, the dungeon combat is in 3D, and possibly even faster than in Tokyo Xanadu. But exploration seems to be all in 2D, a throwback to the old classic style of Xanadu games. Let's have a closer look at what I think is a transition moment from 2D to 3D. Does that work? How will it feel when you play it for real in the game? This is, I think, an ambitious attempt at melding together the classic, more Metroidvania style of the older games with the modern Xanadu game, which of course has 3D combat. What I'm slightly worried about is that chibi and very cutesy style for school activities, and also that smartphone. Does that really fit in with the rest of the art style and presentation? You may remember my remark from earlier in this video about how the students in Tokyo Xanadu expressed quite a level of maturity, in my opinion, that made the story that much more interesting. But I am intrigued by the mix of 2D and 3D action, and in the end only the gameplay itself can tell us whether the whole thing hangs together and is fun to play. So let's have a closer look at combat details. First, the basics. Normal attack. You can do a combo with up to 3 hits. A powerful attack is unique to each character, and what's more, can also trigger what they call a derivative attack. So there is some more finesse included here, and then your standard evasion via a dodging mechanic. So far this sounds like a standard action RPG combat and pretty similar to Tokyo Xanadu. The jump command being height adjustable sounds more sophisticated. Shooting attack sounds just like the ranged attack in Tokyo Xanadu. You can also fire special projectiles, so that's another expansion of the ranged repertoire. Your defense action also functions as a parry command. What? The Soul Accelerator is an all-round enhanced, more powerful attack, also making timing and parrying easier. There's also then a chance of counter-attacking. This is interesting because it sounds like they moved away from the Tokyo Xanadu style of having multiple EX and X drive, etc. special attacks to one supercharged attack that does multiple things all rolled into one. I think that's what it says. As always, the proof will be in the pudding, i.e. the ins and outs of the new combat system. Finally, your secret combo attack, fueled by a gauge. It does sound rather like an EX attack in Tokyo Xanadu, but is a bit different yet again because it does damage to the entire field. This setup to me looks like some of the basics of the Tokyo Xanadu system were retained, but there has been extensive updating and tweaking. How different it really is, we will see in 3 months' time. Character design looks very appealing in the modern style that's rather common these days. I love all the detail, but there is perhaps just a bit of lack of individuality. That's of course where the voice acting is so important, to infuse a character with real life and personality.
ちゃんとしてもらわないと困ります。チームの一員として。Kyoto Xanadu, SPiKA Game, Falcom.
A final look at the world setting. The capital, Kyoto, The capital of Japan, although the system of government has changed since the capital was moved there 1200 years ago, it has consistently remained the capital of Japan. Okay, they'll probably need to explain that a bit more in the game. It sounds like it's an alternate future kind of modern society. In addition to streetscapes that evoke a sense of tradition and history, modernized districts are scattered throughout the area. So they're obviously trying to make the most of the wonderful historic ambience of Kyoto, but still maintain a modern life and setting for the story. The Academy accepts so-called qualified individuals who are expected to tackle the great labyrinth underneath the Academy. And here are more details about this other world and what is still called the Eclipse. And the monstrous enemies are still called greeds and sound very similar by nature to those we faced in Tokyo Xanadu. The weapons that the students wield are now called soul spirit tools rather than the soul devices we had in Tokyo Xanadu. And of course only qualified individuals can wield them. This website is being updated regularly, so if you're interested in the game, could well be worth checking in occasionally. And that was it for today. Tokyo and Kyoto Xanadu. I am really excited for a new Xanadu game. I would be so thrilled if this becomes an established IP for Falcom. We only have just over 3 months to go, and nothing will keep me from playing Kyoto Xanadu and hopefully talking about it in yet another Xanadu video. As always, thank you very much for joining me. Please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye.